Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here to share a simple card with some Copic coloring tips as well as how to use pattern paper without creating a lot of scraps. I'm starting with the Happy Halloween stamp set from Doodlebug Designs. It's part of their Candy Carnival stamp set. And I'm adding in some letters from Mama Elephant, the Color Me letters. There is the Hello Pumpkin sentiment in the Happy Halloween sentiment, but I did, or stamp set, but I did want to make it a little bit more prominent. So I added in these letters that you can color in and did a high pumpkin instead. I liked it because it allowed me to pull in some purple and it made the scene look a little bit more full. I'm using V17, 15, and 12. This is not my favorite purple combination. I do prefer to use the BVs often, but I think it works really well for Halloween. And I like to make sure that sometimes I branch out with the colors that I use because I can have a tendency to always pick the same colors when I'm coloring purple or the same oranges when I'm coloring orange, etc. So I do try to mix it up from time to time. To color the little boy's hair, I'm going to be using C5 and C9. This is one of my go-to combinations for the hair of black characters. I think it's just a really simple choice, and since his hair is so small and he's such a small stamp, I didn't want to overthink it. I used the C5 to create an overall base, and then I'm going to make some curling motions with the C9 on top of it. So there's going to be like little C's and little circles or zeros or O's, whatever you want to call it, on top of the C5. And that's going to add a little bit of that texture of curly hair. Then I'm going to come back with the C5 and do the same motion. With this, it's really important to have a light hand so that it's not like one solid color and instead you're seeing some of the texture of the hair. For the skin tone today, I'm going to go with E37, 35, and 33, but another Copic combination that I like for black skin tones is the E2s, like E29, 27, 25. But I did share a video recently where I colored a number of different black skin tones, and so you can check that out if you just want to see some other choices. But, you know, all skin tones, you experiment with your E-markers because there's so many different tones out there, and think about maybe if you're trying to color like a specific person, look at a picture of them and see what kind of undertones their skin has in picking your E-markers. I did use this stamp set and this collection, the Candy Carnival collection, in a 6x6 paper pad tutorial, and I color the little boy, the pumpkin boy, the same way for some of the ones that I used in that video, but I didn't share Copic coloring. So if you want to see some ideas for the coordinating paper collection, be sure to check that out. Today, for coloring the pumpkin, I wanted to do something that had a lot of interest and was really high contrast because he's going to really be the star of the show and there's going to be a lot of white space. I wanted to pick one thing about the scene to color in a really interesting way and then keep all the other coloring really simple. And I think this can be a good idea in general to not always add all the detail and all the interest to everything you color, but to just pick like what is going to be your thing that is going to get the most attention and really focus on that and have fun with that, and then be a little more simple everywhere else. So I'm taking an E07 and then YR18, YR16, and YR12. I wanted to add the E07 because it is a really deep color. It adds a really prominent shadow, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to go into all of the sort of folds of the pumpkin, like where the bumps are. And on the boy, it's really easy because those are black artist drawn lines. So I'm just going to follow those with my flicks of shadow. And then on the other pumpkin, at the top and the bottom, they show you little bumps, so you can kind of assume that's where they're going to be. And so that's where I added in my flicks. And then I went to the YR18 and 16, but I went all the way down to a 12 instead of the 14, because there is a 14 and I have it, but I wanted to go a little bit lighter to keep the high contrast. I think if I went to a 14, everything would start looking really, really blended, but having that like little step down in the lightness of the color, I think does a nice job of keeping the high contrast. Also, because they are YR1s, they are going to be brighter colors, and so I think that it adds a nice balance of the deep shadow and the brightness that we tend to associate with Halloween. I'm going to go in with YG 09, 06, and 03 for a little bit of green throughout the card. I do try, if I know I'm going to color a couple of things in the same combination, to add all my shadows across the card, especially in tiny little things like this. So since I knew his arms, his legs, and the leaf on the pumpkin and his hat were all going to be colored, I kind of go in with the shadow color for all of them, then go in with mid-tone for all of them, and then with the lightest color for all of them, just to save myself some time. If I colored like just one little arm and then just another little arm, it would take so much more time. So if you can kind of think ahead, especially in a bigger scene where you might be using the same colors, it can save you a bit of time. I'm going to go with E89 and 87 for the stems. I actually like them to be a little bit of a darker color. In the past, I've kind of gotten with the E3s, and those tend to be bright, but going into the E8s allows them to be a bit more desaturated, and I like that better for pumpkin stems. But there, I forgot to color both stems at the same time, so my time-saving tip I didn't do, and not because it's, I mean, obviously it was just a little mistake, but I sometimes forget to do that. But if I am going to color, like a lot of times I also color multiples of the same image. Like for when I did the paper pad tutorial, I colored 5 little pumpkin boys, and I would color all of the stems at the same time and all of the leaves at the same time over several images. So do as I say, not as I do, and remember to color all your little bits. So I colored a few of the pumpkin boy, and I actually colored 4, but one of them I colored slightly differently. But here's where I want to share a pattern paper tip. So I have these really simple patterns. This is a really old collection. It's probably not still available, but they're basically solids, yet not quite. So I have a yellow, a brown, an orange, and a green, which are all, to me, great Halloween colors, and most of them, or actually all of them, are in my coloring today. The green is a little more desaturated than the one that I use, but for the most part, they kind of match up. So I want to show you how I'm going to create all 4 cards, and I'm going to use almost every bit of all 4 of these pattern pieces of paper, so that way there are no scraps left over, because often I find when I go to my pattern paper and I make a one-off card, I have all these little bits left, and then they never get used. Months and months later, I have, all these like strips left over and random pieces. And so I just thought it'd be fun and maybe helpful to show you what you could do to try to avoid that. This is going to be just like one suggestion of a layout, but if you like the idea of using up your pattern paper, and if you have a bunch of collections, I have many videos on my channel where I use up an entire pad of 6x6 pattern paper and make like a whole bunch of cards, usually around like 30-ish cards with a pad. So I cut them all to 4 by 5.25, and I'm going to put these all on A2 size cards. All of my pumpkin boy images I die cut out with the Wonky Wavy stitch die from Scrappiness. And now I'm going to basically frame up the image and then put 2 strips of pattern paper behind it just to pull in some more of the colors. If you weren't trying to use up the whole piece, I think you could simply put it on that subtle pattern or add just 1 stripe. But because I don't want to have anything left over, like if I just add this big wide stripe, then I have all those little pieces that are off in the top right corner there. Like I would have all of those left, and I feel like they would never get used, except for maybe because they're semi-solid. I could stamp some sentiments on them in the future if I remember, but like why not just go for it and use them all now? Since I'm working on a grid mat, I'm going to use that to help me align it up. I think particularly with this pattern paper, because it's basically like a graph paper, but a tone-on-tone colorful graph paper. It's kind of important that you line it up pretty well. If you don't, it's fine. It's a handmade card. I'm not going to stress about that, but that is why I'm probably being a little more careful than I usually would. At first I thought I would do, like, since my background was yellow, I would put the yellow as my strip, but I decided why not mix up the pattern so that I can add a lot of extra color. This small strip is a lot shorter than the 5 1/4 that I need, but since I'm going to be putting this large panel stretched across the card, I can simply chop that bit in half and put some on the left and some on the right side and just leave a big gap. This is actually where that graph paper comes in handy again, because I can more easily line it up. Since I go, on this side, oh, it's like 3 squares down or something like that, then I can make sure it's the same on the other side. And if you're a little bit concerned about lining things up perfectly on the edges, I will often purposely let some of it hang over, because if I go in with my scissor, I feel like I get a straighter cut than if I try to line things up. So that little orange bit is going to be like the only scrap left. I'm going to have 4 little bits like that left over, and that's it. And actually, even those pieces, so I cut out the pumpkin boy with the Wonky Wavy stitch die, I have all those like extra bits of cardstock. I'm actually going to glue those together and create like foam tape, except for it's not foam or tape, it's just layers of cardstock, but it's going to allow me to kind of pop up the elements sometimes. So I am going to just tape 2 layers. This is really thick cardstock. I will link to the cardstock that I like to use. I like to use like 120-pound really thick stuff for my card bases. I just think that it makes the cards feel a little bit more special when you do that. So I'm going to have to add my own adhesive to it, but I do also like being able to use this instead of foam tape, because it makes the cards more recyclable in the end. So when someone's done enjoying this card after the Halloween season, they can place it right in the recycling bin, and we haven't wasted a lot of resources. So I'll add this to the card base, and that will be it. I'll have created 4 cards by mixing and matching the different pattern papers. I hope something about this video was helpful to you. I appreciate you taking the time to watch it. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I create lots of different kinds of videos. I share Copic coloring on my channel, but I also share how to use 6x6, use up 6x6 pattern papers, as I mentioned. So I will leave you links to the products that I used in the video description below, as well as I'll leave you some links to videos that you might want to check out at the end. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.